Hare Krishna. So, thank you very much for coming to this presentation, which will consist of two parts. Actually, the idea of this presentation was kind of prompt or given to me when somebody asked me, why do you think that ISKCON will be anything different than any other religion? All religions, they start nicely, the founder comes, he gives the idea of pure devotional service, the ideal of pure devotional service. They start as very revolutionary movement, but then, in the course of time, the processes, normal processes take place, and the religion becomes kind of, normal part of conditioned life. So, I was thinking about this a lot, and we definitely have a lot of signs that we follow the general path of everyone else, unfortunately. Therefore, in this presentation, I will first present the problem in a very elaborate way, and then give some hints of the solution. Mostly, this presentation is based on the books of Bhakti Vijnana Thakur. I'm also using Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Srila Prabhupada, but it's mostly the ideas of Bhakti Vijnana Thakur with some deliberations on them. And the name of this seminar is Pancopasana, ISKCON and the Perils of Secularization, and we will consider ways of secularization of religion, and we will find out why Pancopasana is very relevant for us. Because the immediate reaction to this strange title is that, what do we have to do with this Pancopasana? If we don't know what it is. But if we know what it is, usually it's something negative. Anyway, so the first part will be mostly the description of how actually Pancopasana exists within ISKCON. And how it actually flourishes within ISKCON in different ways. And then we will try to offer some hints for solution. I don't claim that I will give solution. And I may say something which some people will not like. Beforehand, I apologize for offending anyone, because this is a sensitive subject matter, especially nowadays, which is the whole context of ISKCON is quite politicized. So anyway, my obeisances to all of you who may be offended by this presentation. I don't mean it. It's just basically the invitation to think a little bit along the lines of our previous acharyas and to see what we can do to slow down certain processes which are in one sense inevitable. So this is the part 2, the problem. And the problem is symbolically depicted in this slide. Unfortunately, this is a very small screen, so not everyone sees very clearly. So different directions are there, psychology, astrology, Vastu, and there is little, a pointer, love of God is also there. So we are at the crossroads, definitely. And we can see the proliferation of different kinds of paravidyas within ISKCON. And again, I don't say that it's necessarily bad. It's basically inevitable. And we all know, some people are very unhappy about this, and they condemn it, and they say it's horrible. Some people say, no, this is the best way to do it. And so let's analyze this problem. What is the origin of this problem? And then we will try to find out how to deal with this problem. So what we can see, I was going through this corridor and I saw pictures of Prabhupada's disciples who are living, who already left the body. And a few of them are here on this slide. And that's very unfortunate, because this inevitable process leaves us with a big problem, and this big problem is that when Srila Prabhupada was solving the issues, dealing with the issues, solving a problem, he definitely knew what he means. He definitely knew the context of this problem. He gave the instruction, and then, he gave the instruction. When the second generation, the direct Prabhupada's disciples, they know the problems, they know the Prabhupada's instructions, they know the context in which Prabhupada gave these instructions, but they don't necessarily know the intention which was within the heart of Srila Prabhupada. What happens with the third generation of those people who never met with Srila Prabhupada? They know the problem and they know Prabhupada's instructions. They don't necessarily know the context in which this instruction is given. And then the fourth generation comes, and the fourth generation usually knows the problem but doesn't know anything else. They don't even know the instructions which Srila Prabhupada gave, because, or founder Acharya gave, because it's a natural process of watering down. You can see these test tubes there. And the natural process of watering down with the time goes like this. So we're left with the issues, and sometimes we know instructions, sometimes we don't know instructions, sometimes people, pick up different instructions without knowing the context and try to fight with each other, and so on and so forth. So that's the problem, and of course, nothing is new. Confusion in Vaishnava Samaj is not new. We've been through this, if we consider even the short 500-year-old history of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, we can see that there was a lot of confusion periodically, and the pure teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was overshadowed. And once Srila Prabhupada gave a very beautiful, somebody asked him, Srila Prabhupada, what is the future of ISKCON? And Prabhupada's answer was, spiritual movement in the material world, difficult proposition. So it's a very, very exact description of what's going on. Spiritual movement in the material world, difficult proposition. So we're dealing with the natural process of material contamination, and we have to be equipped. We have to know exactly what is the problem, and then hopefully we will also find out the solution. So basically, now we need a very clear idea where to go, especially because the first generation of Prabhupada's disciples disappearing, and we have to really be established and know what is the way to go. Otherwise, and this is what we already kind of feel, then the normal path of religious movements is divisions and divisions and divisions and schisms. It goes on. Already we are on the verge of a major schism. At least, there is some feelings like this. So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, actually, he gives a very interesting explanation of why the divisions of religion take place. He says, sectarianism is a natural byproduct of the absolute truth. Please deliberate a little bit on this statement. Sectarianism is a natural byproduct of the absolute truth. And then he explains, when acharyas first ascertain and instruct the truth, it is not polluted with sectarianism. But the rules and regulations received through disciplic succession regarding the goal and the method of achieving it are changed in due course of time according to the mentality and locale of the people. As a community gradually develops more respect for its own standards, it develops hatred towards other communities and consider their standards inferior. This is what we, see already going on in ISKCON. We say International Society for Krishna Consciousness, but in reality there is, American Society for Krishna Consciousness, Indian Society for Krishna Consciousness, Russian Society for Krishna Consciousness, and very soon there will be American Krishna Consciousness, Indian Krishna Consciousness, Russian Krishna Consciousness, and so on and so forth. Because, again, the mentality and locale of the people are different, and the natural tendency is that we develop more respect for our own standards, according to our own culture, according to our conditioning, and gradually we develop hatred towards other communities and consider their standards inferior. Again, my apology to everyone, but that's the truth which is given by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So in Krishna Samhita, Thakur Bhaktivinoda, he gives a very interesting framework, intellectual framework or conceptual framework of how to understand the different religions using this concept of Pancopasana. And very surprisingly, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that Pancopasana, which we usually think is a misconception of Mayavadis, has a lot to do with us Vaishnavas. This is the direct quote from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bharavahi Vaishnavas. I'm using here the original term of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He describes that there are two categories of Vaishnavas, Bharavahi and Saragrahi. The translators, they translated Bharavahi as S-like Vaishnavas. Nobody wants to identify with S-like Vaishnavas. Therefore, I returned the original Sanskrit term. But literally, this is what it means. Bharavahi Vaishnavas means the Vaishnavas who are more concerned with this, Bharavahi basically means they're carrying the loads, who are more concerned with the formalities of religion. This is, more external people who are more externally, have more external approach. And Saragrahi is naturally somebody who can extract the essence. So the translator translated it as swan-like. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives a very bad news to us. He says, Bharavahi Vaishnavas, or external Vaishnavas, who are more concerned with the formalities and external part of religion, fall into the categories of Shaktas, followers of Durga, Sauras, followers of Sangat, Ganapatyas, followers of Ganesha, Shaivaites, followers of Shiva, and Vaishnavas, followers of Vishnu. But Saragrahi Vaishnavas are non-sectarian and therefore rare. So he clearly says that you can be a Vaishnava, but still you will be a Shakta. You will be a Vaishnava with this, clear tinge of Shakta or Shakti worship. Or Sauras or Ganapatyas. We will, in detail, consider what it is. And but let's first go into the whole concept of Pancopasana. And then we will go one by one. And in the second part of the seminar, I will show how all these Vaishnavas are happily existing within Hare Krishna movement. So, usually there are many quotes where Srila Prabhupada condemns this Pancopasana. This is one of the quotes from the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. For example, the Mayavadis worship 5 demigods Pancopasana. So it's Mayavadis who worship 5 demigods Pancopasana. They do not actually believe in the form of the Lord, but for the sake of worship, they imagine some form to be God. Generally, they imagine a form of Vishnu, a form of Shiva, and forms of Ganesha, the Sangat, and Durga. This is called Pancopasana. So Prabhupada very clearly says, this is Mayavadis, have nothing to do with us. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is even stronger in this regard. The smartest worship of Vishnu is part of their worship of demigods such as Ganesha, Surya, and so on, and does not qualify as worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, worshipping Vishnu as if he were one of the 5 demigods means to view him as a demigod, failing to recognize his superlative position. Such worship is both offensive and atheistic. So this is the condemnation of Pancopasana, which makes it even more intriguing why Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that there are Vaishnavas who belong to this cult. And moreover, he says most of the Vaishnavas belong to these Panchopasakas. He says that the real Vaishnavas are very rare. Of course, every one of you is this very rare Vaishnava. There's no doubt about it. It so happened that all these rare Vaishnavas gathered together in one room, but the rest are questionable. Anyway, let's go further and try to understand what is the concept behind it. Actually, Prabhupada himself beautifully explains the concept which is there. This is his purport to the famous verse Tadashmasharam Hridayam Bhatedam from the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where it is explained that if somebody is not shedding tears while chanting the holy name, for sure his heart is still framed. And in the purport to this verse, Prabhupada explains these different stages of this still framed heart or contaminated consciousness, which deprives us the high bhakti sentiments, the very high sentiments of love of Godhead. Very interestingly, Srila Prabhupada explains. By such gross conception, he explains Virat-rupa, by such gross conception of God, through the material manifestation of his energy, one is enabled to spiritualize the mind and the senses and gradually concentrate the mind upon Lord Vishnu, the Supreme, who is present as the super soul in every heart and everywhere, in every atom of the material universe. The system of Pancopasana, recommending 5 mental attitudes for the common man, is also enacted for this purpose, namely gradual development, worship of the superior that may be in the form of fire, electricity, sun, mass of living entities, beings, Lord Shiva, and at last the impersonal super soul, the partial representation of Lord Vishnu. So this is the explanation of this concept. Prabhupada actually condemning this general Pancopasana, he also says that there is a room for Pancopasana. That actually this is the description of gradual development of human consciousness and natural development of human consciousness. Natural gradual development, and we will see it in the details. What is most important in this quote is that this is the 5 mental attitudes. The Pancopasana is the concept which actually depicts the 5 mental attitudes of a common religious practitioner, which he brings with himself while trying to worship the Supreme Lord. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he explains it actually, Pancopasana is actually the description of natural development of human consciousness. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he gives a brilliant, amazing explanation of how it works. Please listen very, very carefully. Human beings have 2 types of tendencies, arthic or material and paramarthic or spiritual. Basically what he says that we all have material tendencies and we also have paramarthic tendency to worship the higher power. That's what he called paramarthic tendency, spiritual. The constitutional activity of pure soul are called swadharma or prescribed activities. In the pure state of existence, this swadharma is present in the form of spiritual activities. All the above mentioned material tendency becomes successful when dovetailed with spiritual activities. Otherwise, they cannot independently help one attain the highest goal. From engagement in material activities up to the awakening of spiritual activities is called the preliminary stage of God consciousness. From this preliminary stage up to Uttamadhikari stage, there are innumerable levels. What Bhaktivinoda Thakur says here is that we have this paramarthic tendency, spiritual tendency to surrender to the supreme power. And we have material tendency. We want to enjoy the senses, we want to enjoy mentally, we want to have good health, so on and so forth, good family life. So he says, when we marry this natural material tendency with the spiritual tendency, which we all have, then this material tendency will become successful, and ultimately it will bring us to the highest goal. So he explains this. I mean, I'm sure you all know this, but it's a very interesting way how he puts it, and it's a very interesting concept. But he says that from this initial stage of our development, when we try to satisfy our material tendencies within the framework of spiritual movement, up to the highest level of spiritual development, there are many stages. Innumerable levels from preliminary stage. In other words, you know, we are on some level of Krishna consciousness, and there is the highest possible Krishna consciousness, the most pure Krishna consciousness. And there is a path which goes from our level of Krishna consciousness, according to our conditioning, according to our present condition, up to the highest stage. And actually, this path is called Pancopasana within ISKCON. So we will see it very clearly very soon. So Bhakti Vijnana Thakur's, the pure spiritual consciousness is called Swadharma, Jaiva Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, Sattvata Dharma. By the way, if somebody needs this presentation, I will be happy to share it. There is no, the copyright is Bhakti Vijnana Thakur's, not mine. So you don't need to put all the pictures. Yeah, I'll be happy to give it to you. So the pure state, there is a pure state of Krishna consciousness. Swadharma, Jaiva Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, Sattvata Dharma, all Krishna consciousness. And there are preliminary stages of Krishna consciousness which can be called Shakta Dharma, Saura Dharma, worship of sun god, Ganapatya Dharma, Shaiva Dharma, and Vaishnava Dharma. So basically, these innumerable stages or levels of development, Bhakti Vijnana Thakur is dividing into 6 levels. 5 preliminary stages, and the 6th one is the highest one, the one which we are supposed to strive. So, and these natural tendencies which we are trying to satisfy within the framework of Krishna consciousness movement are famous Kama, Dharma, Artha, Moksha, Mukti, personal liberation, and ultimately Swadharma, the pure love of God. We want, and we need sense enjoyment. Well, you don't need, I need. You probably, because you're all this swan-like rare Vaishnavas, I'm lost here. Anyway, sense enjoyment is there. The tendency for sense enjoyment is there. Dharma is there. The morality is there. This is Dharma. Artha is there. Prosperity is there. Desire for liberation. Oh, yeah, it's so many people want liberation. Personal liberation, little better than Sayujya Mukti. And ultimately, pure love of God. But unfortunately, pure love of God is such a high ideal that it may not even be, theoretically we understand it. Theoretically we accept it as a goal. But as far as our present level, it may not be so relevant. And therefore people, sometimes they lose enthusiasm because they kind of cannot relate to this very high concept. And actually, if we read the descriptions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dancing in Ratha Yatra and, jumping high and, crashing on the ground and foam is coming out from his mouth. I'm not sure if we want to reach immediately to this level when the foam is coming out from our mouths. So what I want to say is that it may not be 100%, 10% relevant in our present condition. And therefore, this gradual path which Bhakti Vijnana Thakur is explaining is actually exactly this path. Shakta Dharma is nothing but facility to satisfy our senses within the religious framework, within the framework of worshipping Krishna. We'll see how it works. Saura Dharma is this facility to satisfy our natural desire for healthy social interactions. Because what is morality? Morality is nothing but, rules for healthy social interaction. And then Artha, of course, prosperity. Ganapatya Dharma is actually the set of rules which teach us how to achieve success and prosperity in this material world while worshipping the higher power. And then moksha, liberation from the sufferings, it's Shaiva Dharma. And then Vaishnava Dharma is actually about personal liberation. If you take all other four Vaishnava Sampradayas, the four Vaishnava Sampradayas are all talking about liberation. You ask them, what is your goal? They will say, mukti. Nobody will say love of God. Nobody will say service of God. They will say mukti. So that's the normal Vaishnava Sampradaya. This is the 5th stage. And of course, love of God is the 6th stage. And we have to know how to progress through the stages and exactly know what are the stages. So basically, that's what we have. We have the same ladder with Durga or Shakta worship, and then sun god worship, Ganesh worship, Shiva worship, Vishnu worship, and ultimately Krishna worship. And actually, pure Krishna consciousness is only the 6th stage. Everything else is the mixed Krishna consciousness. So let's see what is going on. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says further, generally, there are 5 types of paramarthik dharmas or spiritual duties that have been known by different names in different countries and different times. If one considers all the different dharmas that are current in India and abroad, one can see that they certainly fall within these 5 categories. What Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying here is amazing. He says that all the varieties of religion which are there anywhere in the world, whatever religion you take, it may be ascribed to a certain level of human development. With certain rules attached to this level of human development, which will help somebody to progress further. That's what religion is all about. The religion is ultimately to help you to evolve your consciousness up to the highest possible level, going through certain stages, and some religion are talking on this level, some religion is talking on this level. And in Hinduism, quote-unquote Hinduism, of course, we know that there is no such thing as Hinduism, but still somehow or other we are all Hindus. So in Hinduism, it's very scientifically described. What is the beauty and the beauty of Vedic tradition, of Vedic religion, is everything is very elaborately and very scientifically described according to the levels of development. So this is has very clear rules and every stage, and very clear depiction of the image of God, which will naturally come to you when you worship this particular, when you worship the deity for the particular purpose. So actually this is good. Pancopasana is good. If it's not taken in a Mayavadi sense, it's a progressive or evolutionary ladder which helps one to satisfy one's natural tendencies and desires and ultimately achieve the highest goal. But there are problems on this path. Very serious problems which we will deal with tomorrow, not today. But today we will more or less consider this whole thing. So the first level, actually here in this ladder, it is explained what are the philosophies which naturally develop in human mind in each and every level of consciousness. When your desire, when your dominant desire is to satisfy your senses, you'll naturally develop atheism. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati gives a beautiful description or explanation of what atheism is. If you mostly want satisfy your senses, you will become atheist. If you want just healthy social interactions and healthy life, you will become agnostic. You will say, I don't know whether there is God or not God, anyway, you cannot know him, but we should be nice to each other. Basically, that's the second stage. Then, if you go a little further, then the concept which you will have is this, you will be religiously moral. You will try to deal with each other nicely because there is God. I was once, I was studying different concepts of morality, how people explain the moral concepts. And it's very interesting how the atheists, they try to explain why we should be nice to each other. It just doesn't match. The atheistic concept theory does not, the morality is not, you cannot really conclude the morality from the atheistic concept. So one humorous Russian philosopher, he says, he formulated the atheistic moral in a very beautiful way. He said, we're all coming from monkeys, therefore we should be nice to each other. There is some little logical gap there. But basically, anyway, so when we know that there is God, then morality becomes very logical. It's actually a logical conclusion. We should be nice to each other. So the third stage is religiosity. You know that there is God, but you're not really concerned with God. You're still more concerned with your well-being. But your moral, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says this is moral theist. He says first moral atheist, niti shunya, then seshvara naitika, moral atheist, and then nirishvara, no, actually this is wrong. It's a mistake. Seshvara naitika is the third stage, and nirishvara naitika is the second stage. My assistant mixed it. Anyway, then there is devotion, and then there is spontaneous devotion. You can, conceptually wise, you can also depict this ladder in this way. So the initial stage of human development is atheism. And just look, this quote doesn't have much to do with the presentation, but it's such a beautiful quote that I wanted to share it with you. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada explains the reason why the atheism is there. He says, atheism represents the temporary rejecting function of the alternatives by the mind. The mind refuses to accept as true or desirable any stationary condition for the reason that it is afraid it would be suicidal. Atheism wants to live on a state of ever-changing activities. It is the proper negation of the absolute conceived as inaction. In other words, he explains why people become atheists. Because if they think about God or higher power, they think that, if there is God, then I have nothing to do. And the human mind rejects this possibility. Atheism wants to live in a state of ever-changing activity. You know, does it remind you something? You know, this is natural condition of our mind. Even if we sit down to meditate, you know, atheism wants to live in a state of ever-changing activity. It is proper negation of the absolute conceived as in action. Anyway, that's just a little side thing. So what is the first stage of this consciousness, development of consciousness? When the material tendency for sense enjoyment creates immoral atheists whose consciousness is on the level of Annamaya Kosha. I just combine different classifications because they're all talking about the same. So we have the material tendency for sense enjoyment, and it naturally creates the atheistic attitude. But when this material tendency is dovetailed with paramartic tendencies, it creates Shakta Dharma. If we dovetail or marry this tendency to enjoy senses with the understanding that there is higher power, then we will become Shaktas. And Shaktas, they worship material energy in its varieties of manifestation for fulfillment of one's desires and sense enjoyment. So basically this is Shakta Dharma, this is Mother Durga. And I mean, you know, very quickly I will go through these things so that we understand. You know, if we're on this level, we may chant Hare Krishna, but really we mean Mother Durga. Believe it or not. We're approaching her because we want to fulfill our desires. And of course, we are now in West Bengal, and West Bengal is famous for Navaratri. Navaratri, you know, if you come to West Bengal during Kartik, you will see everywhere they are celebrating, before Kartik, they are celebrating this 9 nights of Durga. 9 different aspects of Mother Durga. 3 of them are Sattvic, 3 of them are Rajasic, and 3 of them are Tamasic. So the first Tamasic, then Rajasic, then Sattvic, and they fulfill all kinds of desires, all these Durgas, and they're called certain names, this Shailapuri, Brahmacharini, Chandraghanta, destroyer of demons, you know, Kushmanda, goddess of cosmic egg, Skandamata, goddess of mother and children, Katyayani, goddess of power, Kalaratri, goddess of auspiciousness and courage, Mahagauri. Anyway, you know, we all know that people are worshipping Durga, and they're worshipping to achieve certain desires which are symbolized in these 9 forms of Durga. And there is, of course, Tamasic and Rajasic worship of Durga. Sambandha is 9 aspects of Durga, worshipped during these 9 nights. Tamasic and Rajasic is tantric worship, animal sacrifices, Panchamakara, Mamsa, Madhya, Matsya, Mahila, and Maithuna, meat, wine, fish, woman, and sex. So, welcome to Shakta Dharma. And of course, there is Sattvic worship, and hopefully in ISKCON we don't worship Mother Durga in Tamasic way, but maybe somewhere secretly. I will show you, actually tomorrow I will show you some invitations to celebrate Durga Puja in ISKCON. In many ISKCON temples, it's celebrated in a very grand way. But there is Sattvic worship of Mother Durga, Saraswati Puja, It's on the 3rd, 6th, and 9th days of Navratri. Anyway, so there is this, this Durga Puja, and there are, two aspects of Shakti, Sattvic and Durga worship. There is a description, so we'll skip it, no need, we all understand. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says very interesting thing. Please listen very carefully. All behavior and practice instructed in Shakta Dharma is helpful only in the preliminary stage. Such behavior and practice is meant to bring one closer to spiritual life. And materialistic people may be attracted by this only until they begin to inquire about the Supreme Absolute Truth. Shakta Dharma is the living entity's initial spiritual endeavor, and it is extremely essential for people on that level. Basically, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that this sort of, when we come to religious movement, especially high religious movement, and we still have unfulfilled material desires, we try to somehow or other to fulfill these material desires in the context of this worship, and something maybe not so nice happens. So obviously there is a question in your mind. Can we jump immediately on the highest possible level? And the answer is yes, but. And I will not tell you what the but means. It will be only tomorrow. So yes, we can. Definitely we don't have to go through these stages, but it's good to know what are these stages. It's good to know what are they for, and it's good to know which forms they take in the context of Krishna consciousness movement. Anyway, let's go to the next level. What I want to say is that actually let's dwell a little bit on this Shakta worship, a little more. When you look in the advertisement board in any community, very rarely you will see the advertisement, here is the lecture about pure Krishna consciousness. What are there? Beauty parlor, right? Called, how beauty parlor is called? Gauranga beauty parlor, right? Because it's in Mayapur. Or what else is there? When the people get together, there is some club, how to develop feminine nature. It's there. In this community, it's there. Not only in this community. Basically, in any community, people get together and they, of course, in Krishna conscious way, they explain this. And then, then there is Katyayani Devi. What Katyayani helps you to do? To get a good husband. If you worship Katyayani Devi, you get a good husband. So, is it relevant to somebody? Definitely not to this. Huh?
We need more of it. We need good husbands. We don't have very much.
Here there's hardly any, there's only husbands. And so many are in saffron, so they're potentials. Anyway, what I want to say is that because the desire is there, people come to Krishna consciousness. They try to fulfill these desires. In other connection of Durga worship, you can ask, what do we have to do with this Navratri and Durga worship? Another connection is that, I don't know if it's relevant in the West, but it's definitely very relevant in Russia. In Russia, people, they want to connect with the family traditions. to improve the family. I still, some ancestors in the fourth generation before, on the fifth generation before, and 10th generation before, there is some problem, and therefore I'm suffering problem now. So I have to solve this problem now. And, there are so many advertisements of this, even in ISKCON. What it is? It is Shakta worship in ISKCON. And there is a room for it. If we understand, what is the room and how to deal with it properly. We may condemn it. We may say that this is just complete, this is bad. But it will come in any case, no matter what we do. So better we understand that there is this needs, and people try to fulfill these needs, and better we understand how to deal with this. So now we're coming to the second level, and I will go very quickly because my time is, I will have still a few minutes. So the second level is, and therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Shakta Dharma is the living entity initial spiritual endeavor, and it is extremely essential for people on that level. Anyway, so next level is Saura Dharma. This is basically the level of moral interaction without too much concern about God, happy social interaction. So material tendency to establish rules and regulations to facilitate sense enjoyment and peace creates moral atheists whose consciousness is on the level of pranamaya kosha. So we're coming to the prana, the energy. First, we wanted to enjoy the varieties of material energy, but then we realized that this material energy is coming from sun. That all energy which is there, that energy is higher than the dull matter. And therefore, we are coming to the next level, which is called Saura Dharma. When this material tendency is dovetailed with paramartic tendencies, it creates Saura Dharma, worship of sun god. The one source of material energy for healthy, long and peaceful life and fulfillment of one's desires for somewhat pious sense enjoyment as a result. No, it's a wrong version anyway. So this is Saura Dharma. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains. One then considers the energy of work and the superiority of heat over dull matter, and he therefore accepts sun god, who is the source of heat, as his worshipable deity. At that time, Saura Dharma is awakened. What basically is being explained here, that when the consciousness, first you try to enjoy the matter in different varieties. You're inquisitive. You want to enjoy, your tongue, your nose, your ears by different sense objects. But then you understand that actually the matter is composed of energy, and energy is higher. And you become the health freak, I'm sure that the devotional community, the normal materialists, they are not so concerned with their health as the devotees. I've never seen so many varieties of diets than in Krishna consciousness. Raw eaters and macrobiotics and this and that. This is the next level. And the next level is that you consider more, you don't want to grossly enjoy, you want to enjoy in a little nicer way. So you want to enjoy by having energy, by having prana. And there is sun is the, the source of all energy. And there are people on this level, like in Srila Prabhupada's, once he was visiting this community of hippie community, Morning Star hippie community. And in this Morning Star hippie community, they were worshipping sun. And they were all going naked because, you know, if you want to really worship sun, you have to be naked because it's an offense. You know, if you cover a part of your body. You know. So what I want to say is that there is natural level of human consciousness when you more become, you know, concerned. Your dedication is towards the energy, not towards the gross matter. And when your dedication is towards the gross, towards the more subtle energy, not towards the gross matter, then you become moral theist and moral atheist, and then it's technically called Saura Dharma, when you worship sun god with 12 adityas, with certain processes like chanting Sandhya Vandana. Actually, it's the first initial religious practice is Sandhya Vandana. And Sandhya Vandana is chanting of what? Gayatri Mantra. Gayatri Mantra is worship of whom? Om Tad Vishnu. Oh, no, sorry, not Om Tad Vishnu. Om Bhurbuah Swaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimahi. So this is the worship of sun god. And then, of course, you have Surya Namaskar, you know. Does any one of you does Surya Namaskar? So, yes, this is worship of sun god, you know. Please, welcome to ISKCON. This is we have what Bhakti Vijnana Thakur is saying. He's saying truth. We have all these tendencies, and we try to fulfill or satisfy these tendencies or manifest these tendencies within ISKCON. And again, it's not necessarily bad. And of course, you know why Surya is the level of morals, because Surya is the father of Yamaraj, who is the punisher and redeemer. So the moral, the concept of moral comes to a human being on this level of development. Anyway, the next level, let's go further. The next level is, of course, Ganesha worship. It's a very beautiful god, you know, and when this material tendency to achieve artha becomes prominent, then this is Ganesha worship. So first kama, gross sense gratification, then dharma. Dharma is all kinds of charities, food for life, this and that. This is Saura Dharma actually. And then Ganesh, artha. Ganesh has two beautiful wives. The wives are called Siddhi and Riddhi, the success and prosperity. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, later when one considers even the heat is dull matter as dull matter and animal consciousness as superior, then the third stage, Ganapatya Dharma, is attained. What we see here in Ganapatya Dharma, in this depiction of Ganesh, we see that the consciousness is higher than the matter. But still consciousness is kind of connected with the matter, with the animalistic. The understanding of consciousness in this level is still contaminated by the material concepts. Like certain scientists, they accept that the consciousness is different from matter. There are many scientists who say that consciousness is different from matter. But when you ask them what is consciousness, what they will say? Mind. They will say mind. They will not say consciousness proper. They mix consciousness with the mind. And that's why it is depicted as Ganesh. Because, you know, and of course Ganesh is famous as Saguna Brahman, you know. This is Om in the form of Ganesh. So that's certain concept of consciousness, which is still contaminated by material, by very strong material traces. And actually, the form of Ganesh, it's very interesting. It's all description of the mind. It's a very symbolic description. Like, for example, they explain Ganesh has an unproportionately big head. What does it mean? It means think big. He has small eyes. What does it mean? It means you should concentrate. He has large ears. What does it mean? Yeah, you have to listen more. It's basically the description of successful mind. What kind of form your mind should take to become successful in this world. That's the third level of Dharma and the third level of religious concepts, which we also have, you know. We have all these seminars, you know, how it's called? Listening, how it's called? Empathic listening. You know, it's actually, it's on this level. It's on this level of religiosity when we have this, you know, 7 habits of highly effective Vaishnavas, right? Written by unknown Maharaj. And all kinds of stuff. So that's a certain level of development, certain needs which we are trying to fulfill by worshipping Krishna. And that's basically Ganapatya Dharma within ISKCON. You know, there is very interesting description. You can, you know, this particular picture, you can give so many seminars and they will be very popular. Because there's the seeds or hints of different very useful practical seminars for our inner development. And again, it's not necessarily bad. I don't mean to denigrate it. And, you know, Durga had 9 forms. Sun God had 12 forms. Do you know how many forms Ganesh has? 32. And they all named differently, and basically it's all many branched desires of the mind. How you can fulfill this through Ganesh worship. Lakshmi Ganapati, Maha Ganapati, Vijaya Ganapati, Nritya Ganapati, simply Ganapati. You know, all kinds of, you know, different forms of Ganesh for fulfilling different desires. And for development different abilities. So anyway, we're coming to the next level of consciousness. When material tendency to achieve moksha, liberation from material sufferings, creates salvationists whose consciousness is on the level of Vijnana Maya Kosha. I'm combining here these classifications of Taittiriya Upanishad, Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manamaya Kosha, Jnanamaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha. This is the 4th stage of spiritual development. And that's basically when we dovetail this tendency with the paramarthic tendency of worship the higher power, we become Shaivites within, of course, ISKCON. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, the 4th growth stage, Lord Shiva is worshipped as the pure consciousness of the living entities and Shaiva Dharma manifest. Basically, you understand that the consciousness is not mind. This is the next level of development when you understand that the consciousness is categorically different from subtle and gross matter. But you identify with this consciousness. I am this consciousness. And therefore, Shiva is worshipped in abstract form. He is worshipped as lingam. He is not worshipped as something concrete, because your concept of consciousness is very abstract at this level. You have certain realization. You already realize that consciousness is not the mind, but still, you have very vague understanding of what consciousness is, and you want to become this spirit, and therefore you chant Aham Brahmasmi and Soham, Soham, or Shivoham, 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 Anyway, so there are 11 kinds of Rudras in 8 kinds of forms. Srila Rupa Goswami explains them, 11 kinds of Rudras with 8 kinds of forms and different material elements. And this is a beautiful quote which I will read from Kaivalya Upanishad, which depicts the mentality on this level. By meditating on the Supreme Lord Shiva with the 3 eyes and blue throat, accompanied by his consort Uma, who is inconceivable, invisible, peaceful, with countless forms, eternal, without beginning, middle, and end, the one powerful entity composed of knowledge and bliss, the astonishing person with no form, the sage attains this original source beyond the material realm. He is Brahma, he is Shiva, he is Indra, he is the indestructible, the supreme independent, he is Vishnu, Prana, Kalagni, and the moon. He is all beings who have appeared in the past and who will appear in the future. Knowing him, one surpasses death. There is no other path for liberation. Basically, you want to become this consciousness. You want to become one with this consciousness. So that's the 5th level. And then the 6th level, the 5th level, this is the 4th level. The 5th level is Vishnu worship. And Vishnu worship basically is worship of Paramatma. Vishnu as the giver of liberation. And that's the level of Bhakti sadhana. And mixed form of Bhakti. Actually, that's the level of Vaidhi Bhakti sadhana. Srila Prabhupada said that even if we worship Radha and Krishna, we worship Radha and Krishna in the mood of Lakshmi Narayan. So basically that's the 5th stage, which is still not pure stage. We're worshiping, we already understand that, that there is higher power, and this higher power is God, and we are small, little consciousness, and he is the supreme consciousness. It's basically the worship of Vishnu, Lakshmi Narayana, Sitaram, avatars, and the Abhideya is Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, Navavida Bhakti, and worship Archa Vigraha is real. And the Prayojana is 4 types of personal liberation. And 10 kinds of avatars are there, and Lakshmi Narayan worship is there. So basically we are done with today's presentation. I will just say a few concluding words before the end of this presentation. So what is Radha Krishna? Radha Krishna can only be worshipped by Raganuga sadhana. When we follow the path of Vaidhi sadhana, we worship actually Lakshmi Narayan. So that's a very special Abhideya which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to bring, spontaneous devotion, for the development of Raga. And why it is the highest worship, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself explains in Madhya Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita, when he speaks with Sanatana Goswami. At one point he becomes very emotional in speaking with Sanatana Goswami, and he holds him by hand. and his eyes become very big. And he says, Madhurya Bhagavata Sar, Vrajakaila Parachar, Tata Shuka Vyasaranandan. He says that the essence of God is Madhurya. All other things, Aishwarya and everything else which is there, Virya and Yasha and everything, and Jnana and Vairagya, it's all features of Bhagavan, but actually Madhurya Bhagavata Sar. And you can only appreciate Madhurya. And Bhagavata Sar, Madhurya Bhagavata Sar, Madhurya basically means Naravat Lila of Krishna. So you can only appreciate it by employing Raganuga sadhana, which is a very high level. And therefore, naturally, before reaching this, we are in one of the previous levels. Hopefully not on the level of atheism, but we are practicing Krishna consciousness on one of the previous levels. Pancopasana is the description of evolution of consciousness, and living entity will be on one of these 5 stages. Just because someone wears tilaka or neck beads does not necessarily mean that he and she is a Vaishnava. If the consciousness of the devotee is absorbed in gross matter, then the devotee is actually worshipping Durga, because that is where their dedication lies. If the consciousness is absorbed in energy, health, social life, they are Vaishnavas, Sauras. If they are preoccupied with success, they are Vaishnavas, Ganapatyas, etc. So that's basically the conclusion. And of course, this is the last question. Can the devotee be immediately elevated to the highest level? Yes, for sure. But, and I will end here. The rest will be tomorrow. I will explain what it means. And actually, tomorrow is a very interesting session about the solution, how we should solve this problem. Anyway, I hope you understood this concept. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.